Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Chapter 2, Knowledge in the Heart. In the previous chapter, we discussed a whole other way of living and growing, that of knowledge. At this stage, it is important to address a question that many of you may have. We have a lot of religious knowledge. Over the years, we have attended countless lectures and classes and read many books. How is this different to what we have always been doing? This is a very good question, to which I do not have an answer. You got me. I do not think there is any point in this book anymore. Please return it for a full refund. I am, of course, joking. It is a great question, but it has a great answer too. That changes our lives and helps us progress and grow knowledge faster has two important characteristics, which are unfortunately missing in most religious education. 1. It must be direct, and 2. It must be in the heart and not simply in the mind or on the tongue. 1. Direct knowledge versus indirect knowledge. One of the mistakes we often make is in the way we categorize knowledge into two distinct categories, religious and non-religious. Often, any content that contains a Quranic verse or a hadith or refers to a famous figure in the history of Islam is considered religious, and any content outside of these criteria is considered non-religious. This creates two problems. It includes many things which are not religious, and it excludes many things which are. Let us begin with what it mistakenly includes. Imagine it is the month of Ramadan, and one night you decide to attend the mosque and listen to a lecture. By listening to the lecture, you intend to gain knowledge. And as Imam Javad teaches, knowledge can really change the way you live. You arrive at the mosque and wait eagerly, excited to learn about religion. The lecturer begins their talk discussing a well-known pious figure from the early days of Islam. They share lots of interesting information about their biography, their place of birth, whether or not their parents were Muslim, if they had children, and how many, etc. You have definitely learned a lot, not just new information, but interesting information too, laid out beautifully in the form of a story. On the face of it, this seems to be a great way of learning about religion. After all, you went to the mosque, a religious place, and listened to a lecture, a religious authority, talking about a great personality, a religious figure. This must count as religious knowledge, right? No. This is not religious knowledge. Does that mean it is not useful? No, it is definitely useful, but not in the same way that religious knowledge is. Allow me to explain with an example. Imagine you are craving some authentic food from your homeland that can both satisfy your hunger and give you that cozy, warm feeling of being back home. You ask a friend for a recommendation, and he gives you the address to an amazing restaurant. You take it, fully intending to go, but life gets busy and you forget to visit the restaurant. Does that mean the address is useless? No. The address is still a very valuable piece of information, but can it satisfy your hunger and give you that cozy, warm feeling of back home? Definitely not. An address is not food. An address can only take you to the door of the restaurant, after which you must go in and eat. The same is true of that lecture you heard. When you learn about the life of the pious character, you have still not learned anything about religion. You have just been told the address. If you become interested in the figure and that motivates you to learn from them about their relationship with God, then and only then will you have received religious information. Therefore, the lecture is useful in the sense that it sparked an interest in you about a figure from whom you can learn about God and religion. But if you just hear about their life and do not pursue it any further, it is like having the address for a restaurant but never going. You will remain hungry. This is the case of many of us. We have memorized details from the lives of our Imams al-Islam, but have not exerted the same effort in learning religion through them. It is no wonder then that we do not feel like the knowledge we have gathered can change us. What we consider knowledge and what Imam Javad refers to as knowledge are two very different things. I cannot stress enough that I do not mean to judge or blame anyone who has done this, God forbid. We have all tried our best, even our religious teachers and lecturers have, with the greatest of intentions, tried to pass on to us what they thought might be useful. The reason for discussing this is not to judge anyone, but rather to consider how we can benefit more from the effort we put into our religious life. A correct understanding can multiply the impact of our work exponentially and save us from the risk of spending much time doing something, only to realize years later that it was not helping in the way we thought it was. So the first quality that knowledge should have, it is to change us, is that it should be directly religious. This does not mean that those other forms of knowledge are useless. They are very important, but only so far as they bring us to the door of actual knowledge. It is important to know historical details about the lives of our Imams of Islam and stories of our prophets of Islam, but that alone is not religion. It only becomes religion once it teaches you directly about your soul and about your relationship with God and people. 2. Knowledge in the heart versus knowledge in the mind or on the tongue. The second quality that life-changing knowledge should have is that it must be in the heart, not just in the mind or on the tongue. Let's elaborate on this using a very relevant hadith from our Prophet ﷺ. He shares a guaranteed prescription for spiritual success. Imagine at a time in which so many of us are struggling. The Prophet ﷺ shares one thing that guarantees success. If this had happened today, it would have been breaking news. There would be a plethora of YouTube videos with titles like Guaranteed Path to Succeed in Life or Prophet's Advice Will Change Your Life. I hope I have managed to build some anticipation about the hadith and help you see that when the Prophet ﷺ shares a prescription for success in life, it is no ordinary thing. Without further ado, let's refer to the hadith. It reads, "Say, there is no illah but Allah, and you will succeed." Take the time to read this hadith a couple of times. Did it live up to your expectations? It is very possible that the initial excitement you had may not have given way to a sense of unsuccumbered disappointment. That is, if you had any initial excitement to begin with. You may wonder why so many of us utter these same words yet do not see any growth. In fact, you would be hard-pressed to find a single Muslim who has not said the sentence, yet we can all agree that not all Muslims have reached spiritual success. Let us leave talk of others, for we never want to look down on others. Even if we look at ourselves, it is difficult to see how our lives have changed as a result of saying there's no illah but Allah. The sad reality is that because of the experiences of being promised an outcome and it not being realized, many of us have given up the idea that religion can actually transform our lives, or that a hadith may contain hidden gems which could affect incredible change. Encountering this particular hadith in a book or on social media, many of you would have read it and then just moved on. At best, we may recite a salawat before continuing with our lives. We would certainly not stop in our tracks as if we had encountered the missing piece of the jigsaw that could make all of our life's problems evaporate. This is not our fault. The issue is that we have been taught to understand these hadiths, make them quite ineffectual. So what needs to be done? The solution. The solution lies in the fact that we are human beings and we should be expressing these sentiments from our hearts and not just verbally. If what we say is only on our tongues or at best in our minds, that will not have any impact on our lives. Imagine a parrot that has been trained using sunflower seeds as a reward to say a difficult phrase such as glial cells. The parrot has not studied neuroscience to understand what glial cells are. It just repeats verbatim which it has heard others say, like a tape recorder. Whilst in some cases animals may know what they are saying, more often than not, they are merely repeating sounds they have heard. You can train a parrot to say hello when it sees a new person. You can also train them to say blue every time they see a new person. It is all conditioning. What the parrot says is not coming from its heart. Parrots have other ways of showing what is in their hearts. For example, if a parrot feels close to you, it may come closer, sit on your shoulder, and bring its head forward for you to rub its back. But the sound it makes, even if they are proper words, are not linked to any deeper meaning. If a parrot says, Allahu Akbar, it does not mean it has witnessed the greatness of God and is now testifying to it. To the parrot, there is no difference between this sentence and any other. Of course, it may make a cute Instagram video, but ultimately, the parrot is only repeating what it has heard. To read it into the parrot's action, anything beyond that, and to think this is a proud moment for religion, is telling of our understanding of religion. It shows that we have forgotten the difference between words on the tongue and knowledge in the heart. Even when we try to teach religion to our children, we treat them like parrots as opposed to human souls. We are often more interested in hearing them recite the correct words than inspiring their hearts with the correct knowledge. As a speaker, I have seen many children being pushed by their parents to recite a chapter of the Quran in front of me from memory. I find these instances very difficult. I know the parents are very excited to show me the efforts they have made in the religious education of their children, and I do not want to disappoint them. However, all I see is the child being forced to repeat words that have no meaning to them and that are not connected to their heart. At that moment, all I can think is that this human soul is being treated like a parrot. Of course, this is not to attribute any blame to those parents who are undoubtedly doing their best. It is in honor of the efforts of dedicated parents like them that I have written this book, so that the efforts they exert in the upbringings of their children bear more fruit. In reality, this is not just relevant to children. Even for ourselves as adults, it is incredibly important to correct our relationship with knowledge. So, knowledge on the tongue is saying phrases or reciting du'as we do not understand. However, some of us may understand the meaning of what we say and still feel like it is not changing our lives. Even after reading the translation of du'as, we may still not feel like our lives are changing much. This is what we call knowledge in the mind. This knowledge has passed the level of the tongue. It is not just verbatim repetition, but has not gone deeper than the mind to reach the heart. This is the level most of us are stuck at. We understand mentally what we are saying, but the truth of it has not sunk into our hearts. Imagine a person who says, "I love you," but their heart is bereft of love. He knows what "I love you" means, so he's not simply like a parrot. But despite that, the sentence is only in his mind. There is no love in his heart, and as such, the sentence is still useless. If someone tells us that they love us, but we know there is no love in their heart, their words seem empty and do not bring us any joy. The same happens with the religious phrases. Many of us say La ilaha illallah many times without it having found true meaning in our hearts. Another example is the very well-known phrase Allahu Akbar, God is greater. This is a phrase that can change our lives in so many ways once it enters our heart. If you allow your heart to feel God's greatness, then it will naturally find courage and your actions will soon reflect that too. This is what is meant by knowledge first, then actions. However, the same phrase will have very limited effect if it is only on the tongue or in the mind. The way we can see if the sentiment is in our hearts or simply on our tongues or in our minds is by looking at our lives. At a moment of temptation, am I so overwhelmed by desire that I cannot think of anything else? If so, then my actions demonstrate that God is still not greater than that desire. My tongue says that He is, but my heart knows the desire is stronger. Similarly, if I face a challenge in life that entirely overwhelms me, it means my heart does not believe that God is greater. In my heart, the problem is bigger than God, or perhaps God is not even present. However, once my heart feels God's greatness, it finds it easier to trust in Him, and no matter what challenges it faces, it will not get overwhelmed. It is not the Allahu Akbar on the tongue or even in the mind that calms us, but the Allahu Akbar in the heart. There is a beautiful hadith known as the Hadith of Miraj, which mentions some of the qualities of those who can reach the level of Miraj, spiritual ascension. One of these qualities is that they only say that which they truly mean. The words they utter are connected and linked to a reality within them. If they say God is greater, it is because they really feel God's greatness in their heart. The same is also true for anything else they say. This is the sort of knowledge we are referring to in this chapter, as that which has the ability to change our lives. It is not words that we have memorized and stored in our mind, but rather the truths we have experienced in our lives and now cherish in our hearts. The Prophet's prescription for success. Having discussed the importance of having knowledge in our hearts, let us refer back to the hadith from the Prophet in which he shared a prescription for success. As we have discussed, he did not mean for us to say La ilaha illallah like a parrot in order to succeed. He wanted us to say it like a human for us to feel it in our hearts. Naturally then, it will begin to manifest in our words and actions. What then does La ilaha illallah in the heart look like? One of the definitions of illah is a cave. Imagine you are climbing a mountain. The weather is getting stormy and the rain is heavy. It is also getting dark, so you cannot see well, and you are worried that you may be attacked by wild animals. Suddenly, you come across a cave. You go inside and find shelter from the rain and the wind. It is a comfortable place for you to rest. If you start a fire at the entrance, you will deter animals too, and so all of your worries are gone. The cave provided you with all of your needs: warmth, shelter, and safety. It is the most precious thing to you on that night. That is what Allah means, the source that gives us what we need, which is the most precious thing to us. With this definition of mind, you can see that God is asserting that He is the source of anything we might need in this world. If you need safety, He will give it to you. If you need love, He will give it to you. If you need knowledge, He will give you. God is the source of everything. The moment our hearts feel and accept this, our lives will change forever. That is what the Prophet meant when he said it was a guaranteed path to success. Not just saying the phrase, but feeling it in your heart means you are able to find the safety and love with God. If I do not know how to find safety with God, when I get stressed, I cannot genuinely say La ilaha illallah, and even if I do utter the words, they are not from the heart. I cannot mean it. Many of us, despite our professed belief in God, still do not feel safe, because the belief is either on our tongues or in our minds, not in our hearts. Again, I am not judging. It is okay to not feel safety with God yet, or to still be overwhelmed by problems. Wherever you are in your journey, that is fine. This book is all about providing the next step in figuring out how to bring belief to your heart. The aim is that by the end you will be able to find this phrase in your heart and see how your actions and indeed your life change. Let's read a verse from the Quran to see what kind of life is possible if we are able to do so. Undoubtedly, for the friends of Allah, no fear will overwhelm them, nor will they grieve. Quran chapter 10, verse 62. The Quran says that when your heart feels the presence of God, it is so safe and secure that no fear or pain will ever overwhelm you. This is what happens when La ilaha illallah is said from the heart, and it is this type of saying, the phrase that the Prophet said, leads to spiritual success. Chapter summary. So far, we have learned from Imam Sajjad al-Islam that there are two methods of living and learning. One way is to act and then learn from the consequences of our actions. But there is a much faster way, to first gain pure knowledge and then to act using the light and vision it gives us. However, in order for this knowledge to have the power to give us insight, it needs to have two qualities. It has to be direct, and it should be from the heart, not just on the tongue or in the mind. Direct knowledge is the type of knowledge that immediately helps you to grow, particularly in your relationship with God. If, as in our example, we learn about the biography of a religious figure, even though it may be useful information, it is not necessarily religious knowledge. However, if it motivates you to learn about the teachings of that person, and from there about your relationship with God, then it becomes religious knowledge. Knowledge in the heart is a knowledge that you truly know. It is not just words on your tongue, but what comes naturally from your heart. For example, if I say Allahu Akbar, and I really feel God's greatness, then that is knowledge from the heart. But if I just memorize the sentence, God is greater, and keep repeating it without really feeling it in my heart, that is not really the knowledge that will change my life. In the next chapter, we will start learning true knowledge from Imam Sajjad al-Islam. Things are about to get very beautiful. Fasten your spiritual belt, the dua is just about to take off. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Chapter 3, The Traveler Within. In the previous chapter, we discussed the qualities that life-changing knowledge should have. In this chapter, we began taking steps towards gaining this knowledge. This is perhaps the deepest part of the book, as we will discuss the powerful story in the universe. The section of the dua that we will examine in this chapter may be puzzling at first. It will need to be decoded. For example, all praise be to Allah alone, other than whom I never call. Even if I were to call anyone else, they will not be able to respond to my call. All praise be to Allah alone, other than for whom I do not hope. Even if I were to hope for anyone else, they will certainly disappoint me. At first glance, this may seem like a beautiful reminder that we should only pray to God and ask for things from Him alone. However, if you carefully read the verses again, you will see that Imam Sajjad al-Islam is making a very bold assertion. He is claiming that he has never asked for anything from anyone other than God. How is that possible? Are we to understand that Imam Sajjad never asked for help from his family, even for something as menial as a glass of water? This seems impossible. So how can we understand his claim to have never called on anyone else? Furthermore, in the second part of the phrase, Imam alayhi says that had he asked for others for favors, they would certainly have disappointed him. But there are many people from whom we have asked for help who do not disappoint us. Many people have asked us for help, and we have done our very best to help them. How then do we understand this phrase? If they were the words of an ordinary person, we might see that they have made a mistake or that their speech was imprecise. But this is Imam Sajjad al-Islam, and so there must be more to it. In the following pages, we should attempt to unpack the meaning behind his words. Imam Sajjad al-Islam and optical illusions. You may have come across optical illusions in which an image is hidden in a picture. At first glance, you may not see it, but then a friend tells you to look at the picture in a certain way, or focus on a certain point, and suddenly the image appears. There are other optical illusions that can be understood in two different ways simultaneously. For example, a Rubin vase where you can either see a vase or two faces. The important point is that you can only see one at a time. If you see the vase, you cannot see the faces, and vice versa. If you look at the image and only see the faces, you would find it hard to believe if a friend said the image was actually of a vase. Even if you took their word for it, it would go against your own direct experience of the image. There would be no point in arguing about it or thinking about things differently. The only resolution would be to find a way to look at the image in the same way as your friend. Perhaps they might tell you to focus on the middle section of the image, and then suddenly the vase appears. What is the connection between this apparently tangential discussion and Imam Sajjad al-Islam? In the same way that there are two ways of seeing the Rubin vase image, there are two ways of experiencing the world as well. In the same way that two people could look at the same image and see two very different things, in this case, a face or a vase. We are also looking at this world and experiencing it in a completely different way to Imam Sajjad al-Islam. This example illustrates that the knowledge we need to change our lives is not the type of knowledge that can be learned or memorized. Instead, it is a way of seeing the world. Furthermore, with the optical illusion, there is no joy in another person simply telling you that there is another way of seeing it and you taking their word for it. You need to see it for yourself. All they can do for you is to encourage you to view things from a different angle until suddenly it clicks for you and you begin seeing things the same way they do. This is exactly what Imam Sajjad al-Islam is doing for us in this dua. He is pointing at areas in our lives that we have seen for many years, but perhaps not taken any notice of, and telling us that there is a different way of viewing them. In this book, we are not trying to memorize what Imam al-Islam said. Rather, we are trying to see the world the way he did. We are attempting to look at the world as if we were Imam Sajjad al-Islam. Imam Sajjad al-Islam says he sees no one other than God helping him. If we are honest with ourselves, this is not really the way we experience the world. We expect love from our partner, attention from our friends, help from the community, money from our boss, and acceptance from our parents. If they do not give us this help, we either leave them or ask them for it. Most of our lives, we are focused on our dealings with other people. How then does Imam Sajjad al-Islam say then that he only deals with God? We know that he did not live alone in a cave. He was amongst the people interacting with them. The Quran contains several verses in the same puzzling vein. You have not any protector or any helper other than God. Quran, chapter 2, verse 107. It is possible to read this verse to mean that God is the ultimate help, or that if others help us, then it is because God has sent them for that purpose. The verse, however, is bolder than that. It does not simply say that if others help you, they are from God. If you take the verse at face value, then it says that no one other than God helps. It is very absolute. I am suggesting that before diluting its meaning when interpreting it, pause for a second. Maybe God actually means exactly what he has said. Maybe there is another way of looking at the world which involves seeing it in this way. Believe me, if you appreciate this point, you will never look at the world in the same way ever again. It will give you the keys to understanding the deep meanings hidden in the verses of the Quran, and in the phrases of various du'as. For example, the following phrase from Du'a Abu Hamza, which may have previously seemed very vague, will start to make so much sense once we take the teaching seriously. And by our names, which have filled the foundation of all things. This discrepancy in how we see the world also explains why some people just cannot see God, and as a result question his very existence, whilst others live with God every day of their lives, not just believing in their minds that he exists, but feeling his presence in every moment of their lives, so much so that they feel no fear or pain. It is possible with the right worldview to see God's signs and receive messages from him directly. The path is open to everyone. We can all start searching for the knowledge that we can change the way we experience the world. The more we gain, the more the universe will start to reveal its secrets to us. We will begin our journey from darkness to light. This is the path of Tawḥīd. Tawḥīd, the most beautiful reality. Tawḥīd is the knowledge that can help us look at the world the way the Prophet and Imam saw it. Unfortunately, like many other religious concepts, Tawḥīd has not been explained well to us. The understanding of Tawḥīd that the Prophets and Imams had is very different to the ones taught in most theology classes or books today. For most people, Tawḥīd is nothing more than a proposition. If you ask them if they're familiar with Tawḥīd, they might answer that they are, and that it means God is one. Although it is of course true that God is one, limiting Tawḥīd to such a sentence makes it so irrelevant to our lives. The real Tawḥīd is so beautiful that it changes the taste of every moment of your life. To the Prophets and Imams, and inshallah very soon for you too. Tawḥīd is a way of experiencing the world through God. Instead of struggling to find God, one would find it difficult to see other than God. Tawḥīd is the most beautiful story in the universe. The most powerful way to truly understand Tawḥīd is through a thought experiment that is usually only shared with students of knowledge after years of hard work. However, I genuinely believe that with the challenges that we're going through, everyone needs to have access to this knowledge in order to more quickly reach higher levels of spirituality and to safeguard themselves from the darkness of the current world. God did not send us here empty-handed. We come to this strange world as a child who knows nothing. We could be born into a family who does not believe in God, or who have the wrong idea about him. We could be born at a time or in a place where we have no access to teachers or books in order to study. In these situations, how is one to find their way? Even if a prophet were to come and tell us that everyone around us is wrong, that this world is actually a room of mirrors, and that everything is a sign of God, what reason will we have to believe him? It stands to reason then that God did not send us here entirely empty-handed. He gave us the most important tools so that we may find the truth internally. The world of our imagination, which we often overlook, is the most important tool. There is so much knowledge that we can gain just from utilizing our own imagination. Let's work through this thought experiment together. The exercise will be more fruitful than studying tens of theology books. The traveler. Imagine a traveler, you can even give them a name, who has embarked on a journey. They're traveling around the world, east and west, visiting places one after the other. Please do take the time to actually imagine this scenario. Now, imagine them on a beautiful mountain road. They have just parked their car and are sitting there looking out over the beautiful ocean. Now, I want you to reflect on two questions. 1. Where is this traveler now? I do not mean whether the traveler is on a mountain or next to the sea. No, the whole world that they are in, that you have just imagined, where is that? Take some time to think about this. 2. Where can the traveler find you? If they climb to the top of the nearest mountain, will they be closer to you? If they search the sky or dig deep into the ground, will they find you there? The answer is that the traveler, along with the world they live in, exists within your mind, and so they get their existence only from you. If the traveler wanted to look for you, you are not to be found in any specific place in that world, not on top of a mountain or in the skies. At the same time, there is no place in that world which is not within you. It is entirely dependent on you for its existence. In other words, you are not one of the beings in this world of your imagination, such that you can be found there. You are not at the level of the mountains, the stones, or the sea. They are all your creation, and you are the creator. the Creator by definition cannot be found in the world of their creation. At the same time, there is nothing in the worlds of creation that does not come from the Creator. The mountain you have imagined on which the travelers parked, what is it made out of? Stones? Well, what are the stones made out of? Are there stones in your head? No, they are a figment of your imagination. Everything in that world is created solely from your imagination. They get all their qualities from you. If something is sitting next to you as you create this imaginary universe in your mind, they will not be able to see the traveler. Everything in that world is from you and within you. Now, let's unpack how many theological questions can be answered just through this simple thought experiment. Does it not now sound ridiculous if a person says that God does not exist because they cannot find him in the sky or in the space? What is the answer? In the same way that you cannot be found on top of the mountain in your imagination, God is also not be able to be found anywhere in the sky or in space. Rather, the whole universe is within God. Your traveler's whole existence is only possible as a result of your existence. Wherever your traveler goes, you will encompass them and be aware of them. Undoubtedly, he is indeed all-encompassing of everything. Quran, chapter 41, verse 54. Is there something the traveler can do that you will not be aware of? This is impossible. Without your attention, the traveler would not even exist, let alone be able to do things that you are unaware of. He is the first and the last, the outer and the inner. All things are within his knowledge. Quran, chapter 57, verse 3. Wherever the traveler goes, they cannot leave your mind. It is not the case that there are high walls that they cannot escape from. Rather, by definition, they are unable to leave, as the whole world they're in is dependent on you. To leave the realm of your governments is impossible. Du'a. Do you see how many phrases of the Quran and du'as like the one above from Du'a are now finally beginning to make sense? Let us look at some other lines from Du'a as well. Some may have been easier to understand, but perhaps you may now feel them much more deeply. And by your knowledge which encompasses all things. Du'a. Now you know much better what it means that God's knowledge encompasses everything. This is exactly the same as how your imagination encompasses everything in that world of the traveler. It is all within your imagination, and everything in this world is within God's knowledge. Elsewhere in the Du'a, this line, which may have previously been slightly vague, will also now make a lot more sense. And by your greatness, which has filled all things. Du'a. What does Imam al-Islam mean when he says that God's greatness has filled all things? Do you remember when we asked what the mountain the traveler was on was made out of? How about the traveler himself? What is he made of? There are two answers. The traveler himself may say that the mountain is made out of stone, and when he looks at his own body, he may say that he is made out of tissue, blood, and bones. He is correct on both counts. However, are there stones or blood physically in your mind? If we open your head right now, would we find the traveler's tissues, blood, and bones? Or the stones that make up the mountain? Of course not. They all exist, but they are all made from your imagination. The better and more powerful your imagination, the better and more powerful they will be. Those of us who have better imaginations have probably imagined nicer mountains. Keep this in mind when you read Imam al-Islam's words in Du'a. He says that everything in this world is filled with God's greatness. Yes, we have a body. Yes, our bodies have cells. But all these seemingly physical objects, when you truly analyze them, are made of nothing but God's knowledge and greatness. Let's elaborate on this with another example. Imagine a beautiful red rose. What made this rose possible? The answer is, of course, you. If you did not have the power to imagine, the rose would have never existed. It gets its existence from your power. It gets its qualities from your knowledge. If you did not know what a rose looked like or what qualities it had, it would not be possible to imagine it into existence in the same way. For example, if I asked you to imagine a middle-mist red flower instead of a rose, most of you would not have been able to because you have no knowledge of it. The rose gets its beauty and color from your sense of creativity. That is why there would probably be great variety amongst the roses we each imagine. Readers who have an artistic mind with a strong visual imagination will imagine much more elaborate roses. Those of us with more limited imaginations may imagine very simple roses. The rose you're imagining gets its beauty from your own sense of beauty in art. Everything it is, everything it has, is entirely filled with your qualities. Now, let's look at this phrase from Du'a Abu Hamza again. And by your names, which have filled the foundation of all things. Du'a Abu Hamza. Every single thing in this world gets all its qualities from God. Now let's take this understanding to a more practical place, which will give clarity to many of the issues which we grapple with. Let's help. Let us return to our thought experiment. Imagine our traveler is now hiking by the ocean. His phone beeps. Absorbed in reading his messages, he becomes distracted and slips. He's about to tumble into the ocean, but at the last moment, he manages to hang on with his fingertips and is suspended over the cliff edge, holding on for dear life. Let's try to save our traveler from this dangerous situation in which he has found himself. Think of ways you could help the traveler. One would be to send someone to hold his hand and pull him up. Let's try this. Close your eyes and imagine someone saw the traveler's plight and pulled him up. There are other ways to help him too. Close your eyes and imagine his bicep stronger, so he has enough strength to pull his weight over the cliff edge and save himself. Are there other ways to help? Yes, plenty. Perhaps we can imagine firefighters on a rock ledge jutting out beneath him, holding a net that he has fallen into, landing safely. Or maybe instead of a net, we can imagine the ocean is calm and close enough that he can fall into it and swim to safety. Or possibly a rescue helicopter crew appears, throwing him a rope that he can grab onto and be towed to safety. Whichever of the above we decided, our traveler is now back to safety. If someone asks him, "Who saved you?" what would be the correct answer? The only correct answer is that it was you who saved him. Whether it was through sending a person to help, putting strength in his muscles, or flying in a helicopter, all along it was you who wanted to send help. Your help could reach the traveler in many different ways. If the traveler ever needs help again, whom should he ask? You. Now let us return to the aforementioned phrase by Imam Sajjad al-Islam in his dua, which we should now have a greater appreciation for. All praise be to Allah alone, other than whom I never call, and even I call anyone else, he should never be able to respond to my call. All praise be to Allah alone, for other than whom I do not hope, and even if I hope for anyone else, he should certainly disappoint me. Imam Sajjad al-Islam is teaching us to look at the world in a different way. God is the source of everything good in our lives. Anyone who has ever helped us was a channel through which God was helping us. God's help can come in many different shapes and forms, directly to our hearts, through a friend or a stranger, or in a myriad of other ways. Of course, we are grateful to the conduit as well, as they could have chosen not to comply and attempted to block God's help, but did not. Ultimately, though, we know it was God who wanted to send us that help. God is the source of all good. If you are able to absorb this truth into your heart, your life will be forever different. We may think that our money or sustenance is coming to us from our employer, and that if we are fired, we will have no way of providing for our families. Imagine the consequences that this creates. We are on edge around our boss, worry about our future at the company, and live in a constant state of stress. On the other hand, if we really believe that God is the one who is granting us sustenance, we will be at peace. As long as it is coming to us through this job, we are grateful for it. Once this job is done, God will find another way to send us our sustenance. Let us now look at the next phrase of the dua. How can I attain welfare, O Lord, while it is not found anywhere else, save with you? Our welfare and well-being comes from God, and there is no one who can stop it from reaching us. The same is true of our friends. We appreciate them and are grateful for their presence. However, we should never be scared about them leaving us. We know the love and friendship that is coming to us through them is actually from God. Even if they do decide to leave us, God will send that love to us in a different way. Therefore, there is no need to be insecure around our friends or to lack the confidence to be our authentic selves, out of fear of losing them. Once this truth finds a home in your heart, it leaves no room for worry. Once you realize that all you need is coming from God and not from the people around you, everything changes. You realize that your destiny is not and was never in the hands of others. Imam Sajjad al-Islam is telling us that every being gets its existence from God. Every being's knowledge is the manifestations of God's ultimate knowledge, and every being's power is but a reflection of God's ultimate power. Thus, a true believer has no worries. We are told that the repentance of the prophets is for those times when they become stressed. A hadith by Imam Muhammad Baqir al-Islam. This means that we are capable, like the prophets, of reaching a level whereby every time we find a worry inside our minds, it signifies to us that we have temporarily forgotten the truth that God is there for us, and we know that by repentance, which is a return to God, we will find our peace again. The stress itself is not an issue. It is only a symptom warning us that our heart needs to return towards its loving God. God promises us that if you find Him, we will never have the need to worry again. If you have friends around you, He will show you love through them. If you do not have people who are there for you at the moment, He will grant you His love directly. If you can work, He will give our sustenance through your labor. If you can't, He will find another way to provide for you. The best prescription for akhlaq. One of Allama Tabataba'i's students narrates that his teacher, along with a group of friends, had managed, after much persuasion, to convince Qadi to teach them one of the most famous books of akhlaq, ethics. After a few months, they had managed to cover the whole book, but Allama recalled not having learned anything new and not having benefited much from the classes. The students went back to Qadi to tell him how they felt. He restarted the class and, finding them ready to finally learn properly, told them, "Everything we said so far was wrong. There are not the ways to try and improve our behavior and weed out our bad qualities. The real way to reach God is to become a muwahhid, one who subscribes to Tawḥīd. When one becomes a muwahhid and is thus familiar with God, their hearts become a base for all goodness. Conversely, whoever becomes distant from God, their heart becomes a breeding ground for all bad. The cure is Tawḥīd." Chapter Summary. In this chapter, we have discussed the concept of Tawḥīd and emphasized that it is more than just a statement. It is a way of looking at life. Tawḥīd enables us to experience the world through the lens of God, recognizing that all the different influences and powers in the world are ultimately derived from the one and only source of power, beauty, and knowledge, God. Moreover, we have explored the impact that Tawḥīd has on our hearts. By realizing that all of our happiness, sustenance, and love are bestowed upon us by God, we can find peace and serenity in our hearts. External factors no longer worry us. We no longer need to be fearful of losing our jobs or our friends, as we recognize that they are all merely channels of God. As long as they want us, we appreciate them and thank them for allowing God to work through them, and if they decide to leave us, we remain at peace, knowing God will find another way to give